Hey everybody, Michael Snyder here, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is November 13th, and right now we're looking at the visible satellite imagery. You can see BC, Washington, Oregon here, Idaho, Montana out here. You see the low clouds moving across the Strait of Georgia down towards the Strait of Juan de Fuca, starting to burn off some of the areas here across the Puget Sound. Willamette Valley looks pretty socked in this morning, as well as some of the valleys in eastern Washington and Oregon, Idaho, and Montana as well. But you see the nice snow cover out there across the Cascades, Rocky Mountains, down through Oregon as well. So if you are in the sunshine today, get some pictures out there. Enjoy it while it lasts here, because through the extended, we're probably going to bring the precipitation back into the region here. We'll look at the timing on that coming up. You see high clouds moving across the region. I want to kind of point this out too. Check this out through southwest BC, northwest Washington. You see the terrain feature called the Fraser River Valley here. You can plainly see it on the GO 17 satellite imagery here, and you can see that extend back into the interior of British Columbia. It's a nice cold air conduit, brings Arctic air into southwest BC and Washington when conditions are right. Now jumping right into things here, you can see Seattle again below average here. We're going to continue to keep this precipitation away for the next few days here, and we're going to be playing catch up as these systems return later on in through November to try to get back to normal. But you can see we've been over a week now below average temperatures for Seattle and much of the Pacific Northwest. Looking at the cross Pacific Northwest air quality index, we have some pretty degraded air qualities out there. Not as bad as what we were dealing with a couple months ago here, but it is starting to get kind of nasty out there. So hopefully when this Arctic air mass moves down east of the Rockies, it can bring some offshore winds and clean us up a little bit here. Now looking at Portland, Oregon, you can see some freezing fog advisories, dense fog advisory. The Willamette Valley is kind of socked in down there. You can see the beach hazard statements still across the Oregon coast. Probably could be extended up through Washington and the Vancouver Island area as well. This is areas of fog Sunday AM. National Weather Service Spokane. We'll be talking about this off and on over the next week at least here, as we have some high pressure and light winds across the region. Hopefully it doesn't get too bad. Snow and cold return. This is for Montana. Great Falls here. Here's Idaho. You can see Spokane off to the right here. It might just clip northeast Washington portions of Idaho as this big dome of cold air just kind of moves down east of the Rockies, acting as a wedge and wringing out the atmosphere for that moisture, dropping a few inches of snowfall there on the east slopes of the Rockies and across some of the Rocky Mountain areas out there. Now taking a look here, this is what's going on. So you can see a very weak system moving through Montana here, not much precipitation anywhere else. Storm track pointed into southwest Alaska here. Now what we're looking at next is this Arctic high moving down across the Rocky Mountains here. You can see this big dome of high pressure, and you see this precipitation, but there's no low pressure system there, right? So you're kind of like just generating troughing in the front of this big wedge of Arctic air, wringing out the atmosphere and dropping some snowfall with it. You see it come across eastern BC, bring some measurable precipitation there. Will be in the form of snow also, drop down across Montana, just barely clip northeast Washington and Idaho. But what that's going to do for west portions of the Cascades there is bring some offshore winds, and we might stir up the atmosphere a bit here and at least clean up the atmosphere. Hopefully we don't get do too bad as far as degraded air quality before that offshore wind reaches the area. And this is this morning's European run. You can see as we go on into about November 20th, we start to bring the systems back to the Pacific Northwest, which would really clean our air out again and start to bring the precipitation and normal storm track back towards the Pacific Northwest here on through the extended forecast. And we'll take a look at that more here in a moment. You can see here, this is the European wind on the left, 100-meter wind. This is temperatures on the right. We go through on into next week here. I want to kind of show you guys this. So we go on in through Thursday. See the offshore winds approach here? That's because this high pressure dome setting up over portions of BC and east of the Rockies here, pushing this high pressure out across the area. You can see the gap winds coming through the Stampede Gap, the gorge on the Washington-Oregon border here, Fraser River Valley up towards Bellingham, and you can see northeast winds going across Washington and Oregon as well. So hopefully that can stir up our atmosphere a bit before the Pacific systems look like they're going to try to start knocking on the door again here after November 20th. Now taking one more look at it here, the big ridge building over the area, going to cause some stagnant weather probably before all the way through mid next week before this Arctic air starts to move down. You can see it really on the terrain feature there again on the Rocky Mountains there out over the Canadian prairies. Good agreement with the GFS on the right and the European on the left here, and that's going to bring some offshore winds there. So just like to show you that diagram there and see how the Rocky Mountains just kind of shunt this Arctic air away from the Pacific Northwest. Nice natural barrier here for us. Now looking at the European on the left, the GFS is on the right. Check this out. Now here we go. Big ridge building over the area. Look at this. Just extremely unusual for this time of year to get a ridge this strong. We'll take a look at that a little bit more here coming up. But as we go down in through again, you can see the Arctic front push down through Montana, and the big ridge of high pressure come down over the area. Now look at the GFS and the European. European a little bit more aggressive with bringing systems in here as we go through November 21st or so. And the GFS a little bit weaker with those features here, but we'll see which one is right as we get closer. We'll continue to monitor that day by day. Now this is looking at 700 millibars here. You can see the really cold air over Siberia and some of the North Pole here. And look at our ridge here developing across Pacific Northwest. And watch what happens here. This load gets kind of cut off and just a massive ridging here. Look at it all the way across Alaska. Pretty warm air, relatively speaking here, all the way up north of the North Slope here in Alaska. And this allows that cold air to really dive down over the lower 48. And you can see Siberia kind of hogging all the cold air there too. Eventually, this is prog to come out over the Gulf of Alaska here and back towards the Pacific Northwest, and that's what should start us back to our active pattern here again, or at least we hope so anyway. Now this is taking a look here at 18,000 feet, 500 millibars, just kind of showing the unusual strength of the ridge here. As you get to the dark goldens here, that's about 1 day every 10 years. So you can see once you get to the red, you're outside your climate norms here. So you could be looking at a 1 in 50 year event, 1 in 100 year event, or even more. A ridge of this strength is that unusual, and that's what's coming here, as you can see as we go through Wednesday morning next week. Now taking a look at Seattle, Tacoma, you can see some chilly overnight lows, and we might get some sunshine in here if we can break out of this fog. So we might have some bad weather here coming up here, but hopefully we don't get socked in the low clouds too much. But then you can see the overnight lows kind of increase there as the Pacific system start to roll back into the area, at least hopefully. Now, this is something of interest here too. This is the brand new European run here, showing these precipitation values showing up here after about the 20th of November as well. Kind of an uptrend here recently on this run. So that's good news there. Now, total precipitation across the region here. You can plainly see the Arctic front move down here. Here it goes. East slopes of the Rockies mainly. Pushes down through. Still nothing here for the Pacific Northwest. But as we go on in through about the 20th here, you can see the storm track start to return towards Pacific Northwest. It's not a guarantee that's going to come back. You know, sometimes these things can be off by a couple days or so, or maybe even a little bit more. It just depends. We'll continue to watch the trends as they come in. Now, looking at risk of heavy precipitation, this is across the west coast of North America. You can see about Thanksgiving time, we're starting to bring that storm track back in here. So National Weather Service is taking notice of that. Also, the risk for heavy snow, November 19th through the 25th there. So good news there. Now, this is something I wanted to show you guys here. So this is Mexico here. Here's the Gulf of Mexico. It's kind of an interesting weather feature here. Let's just go ahead and back up all the way here. Now, you can see this is going on right now. There's a gap. The Tehuantepec winds here. As you bring cold air all the way down across the Gulf of Mexico here, banks up against the higher terrain over Mexico, and it finds this gap here and spills out and could cause some very violent, strong winds that cause extreme wave action here on the south side of Mexico here. A very interesting weather pattern, as you can kind of see it start, end, and then stop here. And then you see another batch of cold air move down against the higher terrain here, come through the gap. Look at some of these winds come through that area. It's a very unique weather feature as we got high pressure that moves down across the lower 48 states out over the Gulf of Mexico here. And look at the power of these winds coming across the area here. And then we have another one come up later on there. So you can imagine that'd be a pretty unusual situation here where you got all kinds of nice weather. You're a mariner. You're coming along in a tropical area here, and all of a sudden you run into these winds, which can increase seas to over 5 meters, 6 meters, just kind of out of nowhere here, and it could capsize your small vessel, for example. So kind of an interesting feature there. This is the significant wave height and direction associated with that feature as well. You can see it really come through the gap and create these winds. Look at some of these wave heights. Getting up towards 15 feet here would be pretty intense, especially when you're dealing with really no inclement weather here all along the coast of Mexico down towards, you know, Costa Rica here. And then you get these winds just punching out through this gap here. So just kind of an interesting feature that I like to show there. And one more look at it here, 925 millibar temperatures here. Here's Mexico. Here's where the gap is. Gulf of Mexico is there. Now watch as this cold air moves down, and you can see it punch through that gap here. And look at that. You can see that cold air at 2,500 feet move all the way across into this tropical region here. Just an interesting feature there that I like to watch sometimes. Now, one more look at it here. Accumulated max wind gust, 51 knots you can see coming across there. And really along the coastline, you're not going to be dealing with any kind of winds like that. So you can imagine running into that before we had weather maps and satellites here, if you were a mariner out there. And if we look closely here, you can actually see it bringing some upwelling to the area here. As you look closely here, you can see that cold water there. As the winds rip across the ocean surface, they pull that water away from the shoreline. The upwelling takes its place and brings some cold water. It's probably good for fishing, probably brings nutrients to the area as well. But again, you see La Nina, like we talked about the last couple of days, is still squarely in charge across the equatorial region here. We might as well take a look at La Nina as well. But this is probably going to change here over the next year or two, and we're probably going to be talking about an El Nino here in the next 1 to 2 to 3 years coming up. So interesting times as we finally come to an end. It looks like as far as this triple dip La Nina will be the last. I've never heard of 4 La Ninas in a row, so I don't know that if it's possible, and maybe it has happened at some point in the past. It's probably very unusual, so we're probably headed back towards neutral and then El Nino conditions here. So yeah, get out and enjoy the sunshine when you can get it out there. We're going to be dealing with some dense fog probably here before we get that Arctic air mass moving down east of the Rockies and helping to bring some ventilation to the region here. So yeah, enjoy that. Enjoy the sunshine while you can get it. We're going to bring the precipitation back probably sometime here towards the end of November here. We'll just have to keep watching the pattern here as we go, because right now it's not a sure thing and the timing is still up in the air. So we'll just continue to watch that. We'll do this tomorrow. Hope you guys are having a good day, and I'll talk to you then.